Hello everyone, my name is Junaid and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we will watch a powerful story about a village student who struggles to speak English in the city but slowly builds confidence through daily practice. You also feel shy while speaking English. This story will help you. So let's begin. Ravi was a simple boy from a small village where life was slow. People spoke in their local language, and English was just a subject in school, not a part of daily life. And although he studied it for years, he never really used it in real conversations. Growing up, he was good at studies, hardworking, and disciplined, but his environment never gave him the chance to practice English speaking, and because of that, he always felt that English was something distant and difficult, something that only city students were good at. After completing his schooling, Ravi got admission into a college in a big city, and for him, it was not just a new place, but a completely new world where everything felt different. The language, the lifestyle, the people, and especially the way everyone spoke confidently in English. On his first day in college, as he walked into the campus, he could hear students talking freely in English, laughing, discussing ideas, and expressing themselves without hesitation. And at that moment, he felt a sudden drop in his confidence, because he realized that he was not able to do the same. In the classroom, when teachers asked questions, many students responded in fluent English, while Ravi understood most of what was being said, but he stayed silent because he was afraid that if he tried to speak, he might make mistakes and others might judge him. Even during group discussions, he had ideas in his mind, but he could not express them because his thoughts were stuck between his local language and English, and this hesitation made him feel left out, as if he was invisible in a room full of confident people. At lunch breaks, while others talked and shared stories, Ravi mostly stayed quiet, listening carefully but not participating, and although no one directly said anything to him, he felt a silent pressure, as if he did not belong there. Every evening, when he returned to his room, he would think about the whole day, remembering the moments where he could have spoken but did not, and this made him feel frustrated because he knew that the problem was not his understanding, but his lack of confidence in speaking. He started questioning himself, wondering why something as simple as speaking felt so difficult for him, and slowly, this doubt started affecting his self-confidence, making him feel that maybe he was not as capable as others. But deep inside, he knew that he had the ability to learn and improve because he had worked hard to reach this college, and this thought kept a small hope alive within him, even when everything felt challenging. One day, while sitting alone in the campus, he observed a group of students talking, and he noticed something interesting. Not everyone was perfect in English. Some made small mistakes, some paused while speaking, but still, they continued speaking without fear. And this made him realize something important. He understood that the difference between him and them was not knowledge, but confidence and practice, because they were not waiting to become perfect. They were learning while speaking, and this realization slowly changed his perspective. That day, Ravi made a quiet decision within himself, that he would not remain silent forever, and even if it felt uncomfortable, he would start trying step by step, because he knew that staying silent would never help him grow. He did not make any big promises or unrealistic goals, but he decided to start with small efforts, because he understood that big changes come from small, consistent actions, and this thought became the beginning of his journey. Even though he still felt nervous and unsure, there was something new within him, a willingness to try, a small courage that told him that maybe, just maybe, he could change his situation if he did not give up. And with that small but powerful decision, Ravi took his first mental step toward a new life, a life where he would slowly move from silence to expression, from fear to confidence, and from doubt to belief. After making that quiet decision to change, Ravi knew that thinking alone would not improve his situation, because the real challenge was not understanding English, but actually using it in real-life situations, where fear, hesitation, and self-doubt often took control. In the beginning, he tried to prepare himself mentally before speaking, thinking about what he would say, how he would say it, and whether it would be correct or not, but this overthinking made the process even more difficult, because by the time he formed a sentence in his mind, the moment to speak had already passed. One day in class, the teacher asked a simple question, and Ravi knew the answer clearly, and for a few seconds he gathered the courage to raise his hand slightly, but as soon as all eyes turned toward him, his confidence dropped, his mind went blank, and he slowly lowered his hand without saying anything. That moment stayed in his mind for a long time, because it made him realize how strong his fear still was, and how easily it could stop him, even when he knew the answer, and this made him feel both frustrated and determined at the same time. Instead of giving up, he decided to start with smaller steps, because he understood that speaking in front of many people might be too difficult in the beginning, so he looked for simpler situations where he could practice without too much pressure. He began by trying to speak small sentences in daily situations, like saying thank you, excuse me, or asking simple questions in English, even if his voice was not very confident, because he knew that every small attempt mattered. At first, his sentences were broken, his pronunciation was not very clear, and he often paused in the middle, but he continued trying because he had accepted that mistakes were a part of learning, not something to fear. There were also moments when he felt embarrassed, especially when he made mistakes in front of others, and sometimes he felt that people might be judging him, but he slowly started noticing that most people were busy with their own lives, and they did not focus on his mistakes as much as he had imagined. This realization reduced some of his fear, because he understood that the pressure he felt was mostly created by his own mind, not by others, and this gave him a little more freedom to try again without overthinking too much. In the hostel, he started practicing alone by speaking to himself, describing his day, his thoughts, and even his mistakes, and although it felt strange at first, it helped him become more comfortable with forming sentences and expressing ideas in English. He also started listening carefully to how others spoke, noticing simple phrases, common words, and the natural flow of conversation, and slowly he began to use those patterns in his own speaking, which made his sentences slightly better over time. There were still many days when he felt like he was not improving fast enough, and sometimes he compared himself with others who spoke fluently, which made him feel discouraged, but he reminded himself that his journey was different, and improvement takes time. One important change that happened within him was that he stopped expecting immediate results, because he understood that language learning is a gradual process, and consistency matters more than speed. He also realized that confidence does not come before speaking, but it comes after repeated attempts, and this understanding helped him push himself to speak, even when he did not feel ready. Slowly, he started participating a little more in small group conversations, not speaking a lot, but saying a few sentences when he got the chance, and even this small participation made him feel like he was finally becoming a part of the environment around him. Each small step, each attempt, and each mistake was slowly building something important within him, not perfect English, but real confidence, the kind that grows through action, not thinking. And although his journey was still at an early stage, Ravi had already taken the most difficult step. He had started, and once someone starts despite fear, progress becomes possible. As Ravi continued his journey with small but consistent efforts, the changes within him slowly started becoming visible, not just in his speaking ability but in his overall personality, because the fear that once controlled him was gradually losing its power, and in its place, a quiet confidence was beginning to grow. What once felt extremely difficult, saying even a few words in English, was now becoming slightly easier, because his mind was slowly adapting to the process of thinking and expressing ideas without overthinking every small detail, and this natural flow made his speaking feel less forced and more comfortable. He was no longer the student who stayed completely silent in every situation, because now he started participating in small conversations, sharing short responses, and asking simple questions when needed, and although his sentences were still not perfect, they were clear enough to communicate his thoughts. In group discussions, he began contributing occasionally, and even though he spoke less than others, the fact that he was speaking at all was a big step forward, because earlier fear had completely stopped him from even trying. At the same time, he became more aware of how he could improve further, so he continued listening carefully to others, observing how they formed sentences, how they expressed ideas, and how they handled conversations, and slowly, he started applying those patterns in his own speaking. He also made it a habit to think in English during simple daily activities, like describing what he was doing, planning his day, or recalling events, and this helped him reduce his dependency on translating from his native language, making his speech more natural over time. There were still moments when he felt nervous, especially in situations where he had to speak in front of more people, but now he did not let that nervousness stop him completely, because he had learned that feeling nervous is normal, and it does not mean that he cannot speak. One day during a group project, he got an opportunity to explain a small part of the topic, and although he hesitated at first, he decided to take the chance, because he knew that avoiding it would not help him grow. As he started speaking, his voice was slightly shaky, and he paused a few times to think, but he continued without stopping, focusing on explaining his idea instead of worrying about mistakes, and by the time he finished, he realized that he had done something he could not even imagine doing before. That moment gave him a strong sense of confidence, because it showed him that he was capable of handling real situations, even if everything was not perfect, and this experience became a turning point in his journey. After that, he started taking more initiative, whether it was asking questions in class, talking to classmates, or expressing his opinions in discussions, and with each attempt, his confidence grew stronger. People around him also began to notice the change, because he was no longer the silent student sitting quietly in the corner, but someone who was actively trying, learning, and improving, and this positive response encouraged him even more. He also started realizing that communication is not about speaking perfect English, but about expressing ideas clearly and confidently, and this understanding removed a lot of unnecessary pressure from his mind. There were still mistakes in his speech, but they no longer bothered him the way they used to, because he had accepted that mistakes are a natural part of learning, and avoiding them would only slow down his progress. One of the most important changes within him was that he stopped doubting himself constantly, because he had seen his own improvement through consistent effort, and this gave him a sense of belief that he could continue growing further. He was no longer comparing himself with others in a negative way, but instead he focused on his own journey, measuring his progress by how far he had come from the day he first entered the college feeling lost and silent. Now, when he looked at himself, he could see a clear difference, not just in his English, but in his confidence, his mindset, and his willingness to face challenges, and this transformation gave him a quiet sense of pride. And as he continued moving forward, Ravi understood that he was no longer just trying to improve his English, but he was becoming a stronger and more confident version of himself, step by step. As months passed, Ravi's journey of small efforts and consistent practice slowly brought him to a stage where speaking English was no longer something he feared deeply, but something he was learning to handle with growing confidence. And this transformation prepared him for a moment that would test everything he had worked for. One day, his college announced a group presentation that would be evaluated seriously, and each student had to present a part of the topic in front of the entire class. And for Ravi, this was the kind of situation he would have avoided completely in the past, because speaking in front of many people used to feel overwhelming. But this time something was different, because even though he felt nervous, he did not feel helpless as he used to before, because he knew that he had been practicing, improving, and facing his fear step by step. And this gave him the courage to accept the challenge instead of avoiding it. As the presentation day came closer, Ravi prepared his part carefully, not by trying to make it perfect, but by focusing on understanding his topic clearly, because he had learned that clarity is more important than memorizing complicated sentences. On the day of the presentation, when his turn came, he walked to the front of the class with a slightly fast heartbeat, aware of everyone's attention on him, but instead of letting that pressure control him, he took a deep breath and reminded himself of how far he had come. He started speaking. His voice was not completely steady at first, and he paused a few times to think, but he did not stop, because he had learned to continue even when things were not perfect, and slowly his confidence began to take over. He focused on explaining his ideas in simple words, making sure that his message was clear, and as he continued, he realized that he was able to express himself better than he had ever done before, and this realization made him feel more relaxed. By the time he finished, his nervousness had turned into confidence, and even though his English was not perfect, it was clear, meaningful, and understandable, which made a strong impact on both his teacher and his classmates. After the presentation, he received appreciation for his effort, clarity, and improvement, and in that moment, he felt something deeper than happiness. He felt proud of himself, because he knew how much courage and effort it had taken to reach that point. That was his real success moment, not just because he spoke in front of the class, but because he overcame the fear that once controlled him and proved to himself that he was capable of growing beyond his limitations. Later, as he sat quietly and thought about his journey, he remembered the days when he could not even say a few words, when he stayed silent in conversations, and when he doubted himself constantly, and comparing that version of himself with who he had become now filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. He realized that his success did not come from a single day or a single effort, but from all the small steps he had taken consistently, every small sentence he tried to speak, every mistake he learned from, every moment he chose courage over fear. He also understood a powerful truth that changed his perspective completely, which was that his background, his village, or his past limitations were never the real problem, because what truly mattered was his willingness to improve and his consistency in taking action. Now, Ravi was no longer the silent boy who felt lost in a new environment, but a confident learner who could express his thoughts, participate in conversations, and continue improving without fear. And as he looked ahead, he knew that this was not the end of his journey, but just the beginning, because he had learned something far more valuable than English. He had learned how to face fear, stay consistent, and believe in his ability to grow.